Hello and welcome back, goats, to the BigBluePurple channel. Yesterday, I finally got around to trying Mount Ordeals Extreme, and I'd like to talk about my experience with it now that I've done a good 12, 13 clears of it. I'm still working on an in-depth Eureka guide in the background right now, but I wanted to put out some sort of other video this week to have since it'll be a little bit until I can get that guide out. I figured since I've been doing trial rankings for the normal mode trials, people might want to hear my thoughts on the newest Extreme, and so here we are. I also want to preface this by saying I'm by no means a hardcore, crazy, cracked out of my mind raider. I just do this stuff casually sometimes for fun, so keep that in mind when I'm giving my take. But that's enough rambling. Let's just talk about Rubicante Extreme, my favorite parts of it, my least favorite parts of it, and then we'll give a verdict at the end on what I would give it a number rating of. So starting off, I guess we'll talk about my least favorite part of the fight because that's what pops up first mechanically. Basically, he's going to do a mechanic called Ordeals of Purgation. This is in normal mode. You've seen it if you've done the normal mode. Where he turns the room into this panel and he will turn it around and you need to follow the line as to where the safe spot's going to be. This mechanic is an absolute pain in the ass to read in real time, but you can memorize all the different combinations of this mechanic and just know where the safe spots are if you've done the fight enough. Ultimately, this mechanic gets reduced to just follow the one guy who knows where to stand, and then everyone just flocks to them, stands in that spot, no one dies. This mechanic always goes pretty smoothly unless you have nobody who knows where to stand, which it then becomes an absolute disaster. Now, this mechanic is whatever, it's kind of boring, and it feels like there's just a lot of downtime here where you're hitting the guy and not really paying attention to anything. But my main issue with this mechanic is that it pops up 4 or 5 times in the entire fight. There's 2 in the first phase, and there's 2 in the second phase, I believe, but you can skip the last one if you do enough damage, so you mostly see it 3 times in the fight. It makes it feel like this mechanic takes up 50% of the fight, and that can be really, really annoying when you're doing your farm parties, and there's just nothing interesting going on, really. I will credit it for being a unique idea. I think it's cool, but I think there could have been a little more going on there. Maybe in the later Ordeals of Purgations, there's more stuff you need to pay attention to and dodge, or maybe you have to spread and dodge at the same time, so people actually have to learn their positions. Something like that to just spice up that mechanic, because it's really not that interesting once you've seen it once or twice. The next mechanic I'd like to talk about is the Mario Kart mechanic. I don't actually know what this is called. Basically, you split into light parties. One goes south, one goes north. And you have to resolve a couple of different mechanics together. It can either be enumeration circles, a group stack, or spreads. So it'll be 2 of those 3, and whatever it is, you just resolve it as a light party. I think the spiciest part of this mechanic is that as soon as you get your second mechanic resolved, you need to go to your assigned clock spot and bait a protein, because if you don't, someone is going to die and it's going to be your fault. After this, he just does the Ordeals of Purgation panel phase again, and then he goes into his ads phase. Ads phase is the next mechanic. I think this is a somewhat boring ads phase. There's not a whole lot going on here. There will be south tethers from the south ads. You just need to bait those away from the party. They're going to be cleaves. And then from the north ads, there's going to be these tank buster tethers you need to bait away, or the tanks need to take them off of the DPS player. This is an incredibly easy DPS check to me. I don't even think in Prague I saw that bar fill and see a wipe from this mechanic. So DPS check, super lenient. Ads phase, not super interesting. Probably one of the weaker points of the fight. But going into phase 2 now, we can finally talk about where this fight really gets good in my opinion. Flame Spire Brand is one of my favorite mechanics in this whole fight. And I know some party finder groups struggle with this one. Basically, 4 players are going to get marked for a stack, and 4 players are going to get marked for a flare, and then everyone's going to get marked for a spread. The flares are going to go out, the stacks are going to go into the middle, and then everyone's going to go to their clock spots as soon as all of that goes up. It's actually a really fast dodge for an extreme trial, and it feels really, really good to pull off. I think this is one of the best mechanics in the fight, and I think it's unfortunate it only shows up once, because I would have liked to see this mechanic a few more times instead of Ordeals of Purgation a billion times. After another group spread, he's going to do a Scalding Signal or Scalding Ring. This is either an in or an out, and you just have to make sure you're in your clock spot, because there will be a cleave after. After this, Rubicante's Wing will either show you that you need to spread or stack, depending on if it's 1 flower or 3 flowers. Here it was a spread, and we fucked up. Someone came over to my spot and just got me obliterated. But hey, it happens in Party Finder. Never expect a clean run. Even in farm parties, you will always die to immolation because someone's going to come stand on top of you and kill you. 100% of the time. Mark my words. And I say this as someone who's Reaper teleported on top of people and killed them in immolation. These two mechanics being back to back makes for a very, very interesting segment of the fight, and in my opinion, the best part of the fight is this final stretch from when Flamespire Brand starts until Limit Cut, and we'll talk about Limit Cut in a second here. But before Limit Cut, there's another Ordeals of Purgation, of course, because this mechanic comes out 5 billion times. But after that, we go into my absolute favorite mechanic of this fight, which is Limit Cut. Now, Limit Cut is a mechanic that looks a lot harder than it is, and is harder to explain than it needs to be. But basically, players are going to get numbered 1 through 8, alright? Evens are going to go on the right, odds are going to go on the left. Then 1 and 2 are going to go take their cleaves at the front, while 7 and 8 pick up the tethers. After 1 and 2 get cleaved, they pick up the tethers from 7 and 8, and then 3 and 4 get cleaved, take the tethers, and then 5 and 6 get cleaved, take the tethers, and then 7 and 8 get cleaved, and the tethers will be gone, mechanic will be resolved. That's the whole mechanic, but all 8 people have to do it right, or someone's gonna die or cleave the entire party. You know, it's funny because on my very first pull of this fight, we put up a fresh party, my buddy and I, and we expected like very little. It's Party Finder, you know how it is. But we saw this mechanic on our very first pull in a fresh prog party. We made it here, first try, and I think within, 2 hours of practice, maybe less, we got our first kill, no problem. I found this extreme way, way easier than Barbarecia, but maybe that's because I've played the game more now at this point, and I kind of got used to spreads and clock spots and all this stuff. But yeah, after Limit Cut, as you're seeing, it's just repeat mechanics from this point. Everyone already knows how to do them, and it'll be no problem killing him. You'll have a whole other Ordeals of Purgation before he enrages, which gives you plenty of time to wail on the boss and do nothing. So there's the overview of all the mechanics and what I think of each of them pretty much. I skipped over some, minor mechanics or like tank mechanics because I did this as a melee, and I'm speaking strictly from a melee's perspective. So if you couldn't tell with how I explained the mechanics, my biggest issue with this fight is that I think it's kind of backloaded, I guess you could say, or basically the whole second half of the fight is where shit really starts to get fun, and the first half of the fight is very sleeper mode outside of Mario Kart. It's also unfortunate that I think this fight's major gimmick, being Ordeals of Purgation, is its biggest weakness as well, because it uses it far too much and doesn't keep it interesting enough with the 4 repeats that it does. Like, yeah, you need to trace the line differently or whatever, but you can memorize all the save spots, or you can just follow the guy who memorized all the save spots, is what I've been doing in all my farm parties. I think the biggest missed opportunity of this mechanic is not combining it with spreads or stacks. I feel like putting a spread in there would be so perfect for forcing everyone to figure out how the fuck to read the mechanic, so that they can figure out where to spread without killing anybody or themselves. Maybe even just making the mechanic easier to read, but making it come out faster would also be a better solution, so that people have to be on their shit and paying attention and don't have like 15 seconds, 20 seconds of downtime between each Ordeals of Purgation. I don't know, with the way I'm rambling about this, I'd probably make it sound like this mechanic ruins the fight and it's super fucking boring and there's nothing to do. Like, no, it's really not that bad. It's just, I guess when you're farming this fight, 20 plus, 30 plus, 50 plus clears so you can get that mount, it gets really exhausting with this specific mechanic because there's just nothing going on. Having talked about mechanics long enough at this point, I think it's a good time to talk about my prog experience and the overall Party Finder experience for this specific extreme. So, like I mentioned when I was talking about Limit Cut, we got to Limit Cut on our very first pull ever. Like, I watched a guide before I went in, so I kind of knew what was going to happen. But I was not expecting to just make it to Limit Cut in one pull. We LB3'd through, immolation, so we didn't learn immolation on our first pull by any means. But we made it to Limit Cut, saw Limit Cut, and saw every mechanic in the fight, basically, in a singular pull. I will say it's probably because I did this trial like a month late as opposed to like week 1 or whatever. When I did Barbarecia, I did that trial like day 3 or something. So people in Party Finder were a lot worse at the time, and it took us way longer to get the clear. I think Barbarecia took me like 3 days of practice to finally clear that fight because I did it so early. But with Rubicante and doing it like a month late, the strategies have been like formulated, everyone agrees on the strategies, and there's not really any conflict there in Party Finder with like, oh, I want to do it this way or I want to do it this way. Everyone just kind of does it one way and it works. It's not to say Party Finder is flawless in this fight, because God, I have been in some farm parties that are not farm parties, alright? Immolation is 100% the mechanic that kills the most people, because someone will forget what spot they were assigned, or get disoriented, because it is easy to get disoriented during that mechanic, stand in the wrong spot, and then not only are you dead, but potentially 3 or 4 other people are also dead. Overall, though, PF has been pretty good for this fight. Like, PF is always going to have some crazy shit going on, but with this fight, you know, it's forgiving enough to where you can get away with even the most absurd of PF groups that just should not be clearing at all. You know, one thing I do find kind of unfortunate about this fight is how late limit cut is in the fight, and that often results in the mechanic being skipped entirely. If you get a party of people who are like 625 plus or savage geared or whatever, you're gonna kill this motherfucker, and you have no deaths. You're gonna kill this motherfucker long before that limit cut comes out. And I think that's a little unfortunate in reclears when it's like, man, I'd rather skip like 2 Ordeals of Purgation than just skip the best mechanic in the fight, you know? That being said, limit cut is a bit of a PF killer depending on the group you're in, so maybe it's a good thing that that's the mechanic we skip. Overall, I have been having a lot of fun running this fight though. Obviously, I have some issues with it as I've discussed, but I still think this is a really, really fun extreme, and the Endwalker extremes have been super fun so far of what I have done of them. And Barbarecia, I think, is still without a doubt my favorite one. I think that fight is so good and super fast-paced for an extreme. But Rubicante is good, and I think he's cool. I just think Ordeals of Purgation takes up way too much time in this fight, and it's the biggest weakness. If I had to rate Rubicante on a scale of 1 to 10 as an extreme primal, I'd probably give him like a 6.5. The music in this fight and his design, though, are both absolutely fucking amazing. Rubicante looks super cool, and the music is a complete banger. I still haven't muted it, even though I'm like 20 clears deep or something at this point. I still listen to that song every goddamn time. If you've never done an extreme before and you just kind of clicked on this video out of curiosity, totally recommend this as your first extreme. It's not super taxing, it might look a little confusing, but it's also going to teach you a lot of like fundamental extreme mechanics like right away. You're going to learn your light parties, you're going to learn your clock positions, and those are 2 like very recurring things in extreme and savage content. Whereas, you know, when I started with EX1 and EX2 in Endwalker, there were no spread positions like that, if I remember correctly. It was just kind of a follow the guy who knows what he's doing. So yeah, I think this and Sophia Unreal as well are 2 really good introductions to high-end content if you've never touched it before. Like, Rubicante like is the perfect pacing, in my opinion, of having like these kind of burst phases of really fast mechanics coming out, and then a lot of downtime with its Ordeals of Purgation and other things. But yeah, what I'm saying is if you've never touched Extreme before, you're a little nervous, you don't know if you're ready for it, this is a great place to start. Make sure you know your rotation, of course, before you go in, because that's the most important thing, and just be ready to have some fun, have some deaths, and meet some chill people, because even though Party Finder can be a disaster at times, and there will be dickheads in there sometimes, most of the time you'll meet some cool people, have some laughs, and just joke about the fight. Anyways, there's me rambling about Rubicante for far too long for no good reason. But yeah, if you're interested in a Eureka guide, stay tuned because I'm working on that in the background. I just want to make sure I research everything well enough and don't miss anything when I cover it, because I feel like we really need a proper, good, updated Eureka guide now, and I want to do that justice. With all said and done, though, thank you for tuning into this video if you did. I know this might have not been the most interesting thing for a lot of people, but I wanted to put something up while I work on my Eureka project on the side. So, thanks for tuning in. Leave a like on the video, but only if you did. And remember to subscribe to the BigBluePurple channel.